we have been creating spaces for young people to gather and share their experiences. And what we want is eventually young people be part of the highest level decision making, be part of these conversations, be at the table, so they can express whatever emotions they have. It's their future after all.
Community care is a political strategy, and community care is a climate strategy.
There are times you do need medication, like I take medication. The better solution is to be felt cared by your community and to be part of a caring community. And it's intertwined because the work ahead depends on your well-being. And if your well-being is in bad shape, the work ahead will not be good also.
The impacts of climate change is very unequal, disproportionate. Who gets to decide on who gets the help? It's still very disproportionate.
This planet holds everyone we love, everything we love, from poetry to dancing to our favorite foods, to our family members, to our partners, to our siblings, to our friends. This climate fight, this fight for human rights, all the intersecting crises, we fight through them because everyone we love lives on this planet and everything is at stake because of them.
Gandang araw, good day. Welcome to the Wanderer Podcast. I'm your host and Wonder Facilitator, Tony Viña. I'm a human rights lawyer, professor, a happy change maker, a father, husband, mentor, friend, and advocate. In this space, we will host intergenerational conversations featuring youth, we call them explorers, and field guides were experts. They're all my mentees and colleagues in various fights for justice. Climate justice, environmental justice, social justice. From mental health journeys to climate justice campaigns, we will explore what it means to be human beings on a shared wayfinding journey. Wandering and wondering, enduring amidst our own limitations, anxieties, and triumphs, wholeheartedly for our planet and the people we love. This podcast is co-produced by Tala and is made possible by supporters like you. You can learn how to be part of the Wanderer Collective by following us on Instagram at wanderer.podcast. Over the course of decades of searching for the roots towards the better world, our loved ones and we deserve, I have accumulated not just knowledge, expertise, and wisdom, but also a treasure trove of stories to tell. Even more importantly, I have met so many wonderful fellow explorers and wayfinders who have beautiful stories of their own, stories that have over the years intertwined with mine. And in the flood of content that vie for our attention, from news headlines to viral social media posts, I saw a sorry lack of spaces to tell the stories of the courageous explorers I have met, young people, young lawyers, young students. These stories deserve to be told as they can light the way for those who will come after us in all our wandering and wandering across the planet. That's why I started the Wanderer Podcast. My inspiration for the show's name comes from the story Jonas, or The Artist at Work by Albert Camus, which explores the tensions and interactions between solitaire, being by oneself, and solidaire, being in solidarity with one's community. In the story's closing scene, the protagonist's final work contains an ambiguous word which can be read either as solitaire or solidaire. Perhaps the point, it is both. We need to be solitary and solidary. We need to wander and wonder. So for my part, I like this interplay between on one hand the act of wandering, of pondering and thinking, and on the other hand the act of wandering, of searching and exploring. I hope you will wander and wonder with me. April is Earth Month. For our first episode, we will talk about climate anxiety, grief, and hope. And I will also talk a little bit about the war and anxieties it's bringing to young people and older people as well. Do you know that there's a psychometric tool called the Climate Change Anxiety Scale? Or perhaps that Filipino youth are found to be most prone to climate anxiety by the study. Today, we will discuss the latest findings from a Filipino-led survey entitled Who Worries the Most Socioeconomic Status? Housing Material and Eco-Anxiety in a Developing and Climate Vulnerable Country. And this study is consistent with the findings of an earlier study that those who experience the worst impacts of climate change are also the ones of the highest levels of climate anxiety. And in turn, the ones who are most spurred to engage in actions to mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis. So there's a link between anxiety, action, and the crisis. As people who know me and people who have read my memoir, Ransom by Love, I have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. I'm in the spectrum, as you would call it. I'm neurodiverse. I also have ADHD since I've been a child, although that has been undiagnosed until much later. And in the last 10 years, I have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder with sometimes very big moments of eruptions of that disorder. The last one was 3 years ago in 2022. So, being a climate activist myself, a climate professional, these findings on climate anxiety made me very curious. So, in our wondering today, our North Star will be these curiosities. How do we not feel completely hopeless in these times? Climate change can make us feel helpless. How do we get out of that helplessness? Number 2, how is community mental health resilience a climate justice strategy? I'm a master of these policies and these strategies, and very few policy makers actually think about this. But I think it's very important to put it as part of the national adaptation plan, the global interventions on just transition. Very important to include this topic in those plans. And then third, how can we honor our climate anxieties while still tending to our hope and fight? The whole point of this podcast is to find a way forward from our fears, our anxieties about climate, and by extension, the war in Iran, so that we can find that, no, we're not helpless. We can move forward. We can find the light, and we can hope and fight. You know, these questions have bothered me for a long time. I've asked them actually for myself and for others because I do mentor quite a lot of young people in the climate field. So they have persisted for me until now. And that's why I'm very happy to be joined by our guest today, who will take us through their work navigating climate anxiety, creative interventions, and community organizing, as well as their personal stories of finding hope. Our field guide, I'm the chief facilitator of this podcast, Wondering and Wondering. Wonder as in A and wondering as in O. So we wonder, but we also wonder. And our field guide for this episode is Dr. John Aruta. Field guides are experts. They know the field. They can guide us through the long and winding intersections that we cross in this field. An environmental psychologist, John's research focuses on the relationship between climate change and mental health, especially in the global south, as well as the concept of planetary health. He is an associate professor at De La Salle University, an outstanding young scientist in 2023 by the National Academy of Science and Technology, and one of the 10 outstanding young men of 2025. So I'm so excited to discuss with John. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Aming salamat po sa pag-imbita.
Meanwhile, as we have envisioned in this podcast, we have explorers, younger people, and many of them I have mentored through the years, who will be helping us also by raising the questions they have asked through the years. So today, our explorer is a good friend of mine and collaborator in the climate space, Bea Tulagan, who is a climate justice organizer and an artist. Her artistic and movement practice explores transience, climate grief, uprisings, and care, spanning artistic disciplines from poetry and fiction to durational performances and experiences designed for gathering. Welcome, Bea.
Thank you, Dean Tony. I'm so happy to be here with you today and John.
This topic, by the way, is very personal to me because through the years I've also had my own struggles on mental health while active in human rights and climate justice activism. And sometimes your mental health struggles coincide with the most intense moments of your advocacy. And there you have to make choices. Is it your personal health, your well-being, or is it your work for planetary health that matters? And it's actually not an easy answer. I mean, some would say, oh, always, it has to be the bigger cause, the greater cause. But if it's at the cost of your own well-being, how can you continue with your advocacy and your activism if you are, in fact, literally grounded by your anxieties and your fears? And I've seen this, John, and Bea, from other young people I've worked with, students I've mentored, youth leaders I've worked with, young lawyers. Many come to me, in fact. I'm always proud is not the right word, but I find it blessed that young people with those struggles, with the same struggles, they want to be activists, they want to make a difference, but they have fears, they have anxieties, they have depression, and they do come to me for guidance, right? So this is something I want to explore a little bit more, especially more professionally. And John, you're the perfect resource person, field guide, as we call it, for this question. So I'll start off by saying, what are your most compelling findings about eco-anxiety and climate grief in the Filipino youth?
First, I want to thank you, Dean Tony, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with Bea after X number of years of podcasting. First, I want to explain that my specialization is in environmental psychology. And in this field, we look at how humans and the natural and built environment interact. And one of the biggest area of research within this field is the connection between climate change and mental health. I specialize on climate change and mental health in the global south. So I look at many different forms of injustices, inequities in the climate and mental health space. In the Philippines, there are some emerging studies showing that Filipinos, especially the youth, are already experiencing the mental health consequences of climate change. For instance, there's this one of the first global studies on what we call climate anxiety, which is people's worry about climate change impact today and its future consequences. Across 10 countries, it showed that children and young people in the Philippines showed the highest level of climate anxiety and many different emotions like grief, depression, helplessness. So that's one of the studies that really kind of motivated us to do more studies on climate anxiety. We also know that in the Philippines, there are some studies showing that climate anxiety is related with sleep problems, with poorer well-being, poorer mental health. But there are many buzz terms, as we were talking about earlier during the break. There is eco-anxiety as well, which is broader than climate anxiety. People's worries about the broader ecological crisis, climate anxiety. Recently, we published a paper on climate anxiety in the Philippines and its relationship with socioeconomic status. Therefore, answering the question, who's most vulnerable to eco-anxiety? And we found that people from lower socioeconomic status experience higher levels of eco-anxiety.
Oh, that's interesting, huh? I mean, kasi I would have thought, diba, na climate is a middle class, upper middle class issue, diba, rather than the poor. But yeah, can you elaborate it further, John?
It's interesting because unlike other studies in socioeconomic status, we measured locally relevant indicators of socioeconomic status in the Philippines about properties they own or they don't own. Therefore, we followed an index that shows who's middle class, who's lower class, who's upper class. And we also measured So that's the objective socioeconomic status. But we also measured the subjective perception of socioeconomic status. You may be actually middle class, but you might feel poor, right? So psychologically, we hold this perception of where we are in the socioeconomic ladder. We also found that people who perceive themselves as poor also showed higher levels of eco-anxiety because they feel like they have less control over things that the bigger things like climate change, environmental problems. I think what's most interesting personally to me is when we assess the house materials of our participants, we assess whether they are residing in light material houses, makeshift houses, semi-concrete houses versus concrete houses. We found similar pattern that those Filipinos residing in light material houses experience the highest level of eco-anxiety.
That seems logical, di ba? Pero that's in other fields, no, economic field, there's a lot of work now on precariousness, right? I mean, so, we pride ourselves as about to become middle income. We've been trying to breach the middle income is really it's an abstract concept based on income per annum, no, average income of and we're nearly there. No, we're nearly like just missing a few dollars there, but people don't feel that. Because of the precariousness, and that's a really good point. Housing. I mean, it's about where they live and how vulnerable are they for this one big disaster that can completely change their lives, even if they have income, even if they have assets, right? If your house is destroyed, even if you own that house, if your job disappears because of a disaster, right? So, yeah, that's a really good point, John.
And we have many fellow Filipinos who feel anxious or re-experience trauma every time there's an incoming typhoon. Summer is coming, and so living in a light material house would feel like you're in an oven, right? So the regulating the indoor temperature is a struggle for many Filipinos coming from low income backgrounds.
Yes. Yeah. How about you, Bea? I want to move to you, and I'm very happy to have seen you grow. I mean, in the last 12 years. We met in 2014 when we were going to Lima for the, I think, 20th Conference of Parties of the Climate Change Convention. So I've seen you grown, I've seen you mature, struggle. So you find your footing in the climate justice movement. You start specializing also in working with the youth, and you yourself had also these struggles, right? So do these findings of John resonate with you?
Yes, Dean Tony. Actually, it resonates with me both on a personal level, as you said, having grown up in this space, having to rediscover my identity growing up in this space, but also in my extensive work with youth, not just in the Philippines, but also in the global south. I'm finding that many tensions are arising in the youth, especially those who are campaigning and organizing for climate justice. Usually they would report to me as an ate or as an elder sister in the climate space. Many young people have told me that they too feel depressed, hopeless, exhausted, campaigning and organizing for climate justice. But it really is the fight that keeps them going because they know that their future is at stake. The findings definitely resonate with me because they keep complaining about having to let go of their childhood dreams to become fighters for climate justice, which is not to say that they don't want to be in this space, but they hold those tensions within them. I know of a couple of youth activists, Dean. They want to pursue STEM fields. They want to pursue theater arts, poetry. They want to pursue research studies elsewhere. But they find themselves compelled to working within the movement because it's their way of navigating through these emotions and making sense of the world as it is today.
And this is pushing the envelope a little bit. What are the worst experiences of eco anxiety and climate anxiety that you have seen in your years of experiencing in the youth movement? Do people sometimes cry? Do people feel like they can't do anything else? do people have breakdowns actually? I think it's important. It's an honest question to ask.
Yes.
I will just be very, very direct with our listeners that I've had myself through the years, just in this last 15 years, to mental health breakdowns, right? I didn't have to be hospitalized, but I would say I was like 1 hour away from being hospitalized before I was able to put a grip to myself, right? So, do those things happen to people that you've seen?
Yes, for sure. Over the years din, Tony and John, I've actually witnessed some very good friends of mine needing to take extensive time off, not just from the movement, but from the many things that they hold dear. They would take leaves from school, they would take leaves from work, they would take leaves from creative pursuits because they would need to tend to their emotional and mental health because of, I guess, the weight of carrying the crisis, feeling like you are responsible for your future now, but also the weight of feeling like your own personal pains are insignificant. In the scale of the crisis, they would feel guilty that they are going through depression, that they are going through anxiety, when so much of the world is at stake. So I think it's always a tension for many young people navigating through the pain of the world versus the personal, individual pains that we hold as human beings, right?
Yeah. And John, when that happens, if someone comes to you, right, or someone comes to me, and I'm not a professional, right, so and so I call you, John, what do I do with this? Anong gagawin ko dito? Umiiyak itong batang ito,
Yeah.
di ba? Hindi na siya makatayo. What should I say to that person?
Very interesting. First, I wanna clarify that the connection between climate change and mental health is very complex, and this is a very new area of research. We continuously learn on evidence, emerging evidence on the topic, but the evidence acquisition is very fast. We learn from evidence, but we also learn from practice. That's why I really like what you're sharing, Bea. But what's interesting part of the evidence is that some emotional responses to climate change, like climate anxiety, eco-anxiety, climate grief, they are considered adaptive and normal. They are not mental health disorders. They are not listed in the diagnostic statistical manual of mental disorders. As a person focusing on environmental psychology, I'd like to say that they are normal responses. Normal because climate change is real. It's already happening. It's already destroying people's lives. The broader ecological crisis is harming everyone and very unequally. So responding emotionally is only normal. What worries me more is when people don't react
Yeah.
despite this really alarming.
Yeah,
You know.
I like that point and like that insight because there are various personalities, characters that you work with in this fight, in this movement, and what worries me most actually are people who seem to be unaffected by all of this,
Yes.
who just keep on going. And very that applies to me also. There was a time, in fact, I can say now that my first big breakdown in my bipolar situation was in the period 2009 to 2012 when we were negotiating the Copenhagen climate agreement, which was a failure. There was a time in Copenhagen, especially in Copenhagen in winter, that I did not sleep for 12 days. I did not sleep for 12 days. I ate hot dogs only for 12 days. I had an assistant then, Esperanza Garcia, and want to remember you, Esperanza, for what you do. The first youth delegate in the climate delegation of the Philippines, and she would be the one to procure my hot dog every meal. Hot dog every meal for 12 days. Can you believe that? Because I had to stay in a space in Copenhagen. But after that, I lost my voice. I acquired, or I was diagnosed with diabetes, and in a couple of years, because I stupidly continued to do that, my mental health collapsed. So now I'm very wary when there are people who are would seem to be unaffected, right? And just like we call it in activism, not just in climate, but in general activism, the grim and determined activists who end up not taking care of himself or herself, and in the end can be very harmful also to the movement. Because that's when things like sexual harassment, sexual abuse, drug addiction, excesses, right, work alcoholism, and all of that comes about when you do not take care of yourself. So it's really important to have these strategies of building mental health resilience. So can you elaborate on that a bit?
To answer your question, Din Tony, one interesting part of the literature and practice is one antidote to climate anxiety and eco-anxiety is action. When people engage in environmental activism and advocacy, when we create communities where young people can express their emotions, share their experiences, and not anymore feel alone in the fight against this overwhelming climate crisis, then they feel like they are contributing to something and also managing their mental health. So in practice, in the Philippines, for example, we have been creating spaces for young people to gather and share their experiences. And what we want is eventually young people be part of the highest level decision making, be part of these conversations, be at the table, so they can express, whatever emotions they have. It's their future after all that we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bea, you, what strategies have worked for you and for the people you've worked with in terms of building mental health resilience?
Dean Tony, let me use that term, no, strategy, because I think community care is a political strategy and community care is a climate strategy. Because as to add to what John said, I've also found in my work in the field that it is when people come together and build actual relationships in this fight that they manage their own personal mental health resilience, right? I don't think the goal is to completely rid yourself of these feelings of anxiety, of grief, of depression, of despair. I think the goal is to navigate through these together and to acknowledge that the full spectrum of human emotions requires that we are able to hold one another through these transitions. So, personally, that's also my personal strategy. I think I like, and you would know this about me, Dean Tony and John, that I like surrounding myself with a community, with my community in various movements, not just in the climate space, but also in the art space, in the creative spaces. Because I think it is when we come together, and however cheesy that sounds, right? It is when we come together that we can navigate through all these difficult things about existence, but also the joys of campaigning and organizing together.
No, I wanna build on that because that's really important. I mean, in fact, in 2022, when I was the founding a institution that eventually had to leave to other people to implement Mindanao Climate Justice Resource Facility, our big concept then was community care for environmental and climate and human rights defenders. Because when you are defending the planet and defending people, defending the poor, defending activists, it can be very isolating, especially if you're red tagged, if you're criticized, even your family might not necessarily support you. Then it becomes very important that you have community care. And I think that's missing. I mean, as a strategy, do you see that in any of the climate change action plans? Do you see that in climate strategies of NGOs? You actually don't see that, right? So, me in my own organization now in Klima and in La Viña Sarate, which are my two main organizations, and in the work I do with the movement for against disinformation, in Samdana Institute, all the work I do, I put this in. It's very important. Not just taking care of yourself, but taking care of each other. Is that correct, John, that when you take care of others, you're actually taking care of yourself and you actually heal yourself also?
There's evidence on that, Din Tony.
Oh,
that
good to
yes, one way to take care of ourselves is take care of our own self, but also we benefit a lot by taking care of other people. Being compassionate for other people, helping other people, being altruistic. In fact, there are evidence showing that altruism is very much correlated with better well-being.
Yeah, it's very intuitive in me, but I can say that my own personal experiences have been that the best moments in my life is when I actually realize I've made a difference in a person's life, and especially in dealing with this, because then you know that this person will be able to move on, will be happier, and then will be able to do the work that we share with each other. And although I would say also that I just want to make sure we also say that there are times you do need counseling.
Yes.
There are times you do need medication. Like I take medication for my bipolar because if I don't, I easily get manic. My bipolar is about being manic rather than being depressed. But the better solution is to be felt cared by your community and to be part of a caring community. And my friend, co-founder of the Mindanao Climate Justice Facility, developed a paper on that, and it's one of the best things I've ever seen written about how important it is for environment, climate, human rights, to feel that you're part of a community that care about each other. Sometimes more than just the work ahead, right? I mean, and it's intertwined because the work ahead depends on your well-being. And if your well-being is in bad shape, the work ahead will not be good also. I'd like to move on now to what gives people hope, John, in your studies. So I mean, and here if you can extrapolate a bit your findings to today's challenges, right? I mean, there's a war going on in Iran. That too, by the way, is causing a lot of climate and environmental anxiety, eco-anxiety, because of the direct impacts and injustice, where billions of dollars are being spent for a war when a fraction of that is what we need to address climate change. So, or what do we do to give us hope in these challenging times?
I guess, Dintoni, that's very difficult question personally to answer because I myself still really navigating that and thinking a lot about how to maintain your basically this is not business as usual. At the same time, you want to contribute to addressing the already challenging situation of many people. But yes, it's true that people's anxiety about war is part of the broader poly crisis. Many young people especially already are worried not only about climate change, but also the economy, wars that happening, all these things that are threatening their future. In fact, many young people today are reconsidering whether it is fair to have children.
Yeah, that's really an important question I wanted to ask. Why do people are asking that question? Is it fair, and would it be good to have children? Why are they asking that?
There are many answers to the question, but I think it's coming from a sense of worry and intergenerational responsibility. Questions like, is it fair to bring a child into a climate change era? To an era where planetary health crisis is not looking good. Is it responsible? Is it moral, to have children in this time? And so you see a lot of that evidence coming from studies from the West, showing that young people are having second thoughts. So I guess.
But in the Philippines, do you in your studies have you asked that question?
We don't have data on that, Dean. But I would.
Anecdotally, though, we can say that we have that experience. So, Bea, Bea, do you have peers that are thinking about these things? maybe even not getting married at all because of the anxieties, or no, not just anxieties, but also because they feel like this is not a world to bring in children to raise a family.
It is definitely a source of tension and reflection in my peers and in the movements that I am part of. A lot of it is what John already said. It's a sense of guilt that you're bringing a child, another human being, into such a painful place, right? We've all acknowledged it earlier that it is painful and heavy to be existing right now. But it's also a sense of purpose, right? That's why a lot of my friends have started queering their definitions of family, right? And thinking of family as being more than your blood relatives, but also the people that you surround yourself with in this fight. So it's a source of tension, but it's also a shared source of creative ways to navigate through this crisis.
Yeah. I want to answer that question in terms of what I tell people, young people who come to me, John and Bea, with that question. Should I bring a child? Should I marry? Should I, And I actually say the act of marrying or having a partner, a faithful partnership, right? That's long term, and bringing children is an act of hope, actually. And my answer to the question, should I feel guilty about bringing children to this world? Well, only if you're gonna have a lifestyle that is wasteful, only if you're gonna raise your children to be narcissistic, you're gonna raise your children to not care about the world. But if you actually think you can raise good children, people who will be responsible for the planet, oh, by all means, please have children, because we need parents like you, and we need children that will grow up to be good adults, right? So that's actually my answer to them. No, don't be afraid. I mean, of course there will be challenges, and of course the raising of children is always a responsibility that you should not take on lightly. But at the end of it, if you are ready for it, then you should do it, because that will make the world a better place, not a worse place. So that's actually my 10 cents worth. I have 3 kids myself, and they're all in their 30s. Eman is about to turn 40. Also, he's a translator, a polyglot, has a master's in history in Ateneo. Rico's a PhD in political science, just got married. And Rafa is a lawyer. And I can say they're all human rights activists. They're all climate justice activists, right? Not in the same field as me, very different fields. I mean, but they care about these things. So I feel happy that I have made this contribution. More than anything else in the world, I feel like I have made this contribution with my children and with people like Bea and young people I have mentored and grown. That doesn't matter if I die tomorrow, because I live on in my children, and I live on in the hundreds of people I have mentored, I have taught through the years. So, do you have any final, John, comments, points you want to make, you to Bea? Maybe you start with Bea, and then I want John to have the last word, because he's our field guide.
Okay.
So the explorer and then the field guide.
I guess one of the things that give me hope is that this world and this planet is the only planet thus far discovered to harbor all that we love. This planet holds everyone we love, everything we love, from poetry to dancing to our favorite foods, to our family members, to our partners, to our siblings, to our friends. And I think with that at stake, with their futures at stake, it makes the fight worthwhile. It makes the fight inevitably hopeful. This climate fight, this fight for human rights, all the intersecting crises, we fight through them because everyone we love lives on this planet, and everything is at stake because of them.
Excellent. I'm very inspired being here in this conversation. Just to answer the last question, what gives me hope? I think it's number one, my sense of intergenerational responsibility. I am now at a stage in my career where I'm beginning to mentor the younger generation. It's really fulfilling. But I also imagine that the next generations will be proud of us, that we are fighting for them in the space of climate change and planetary health. I'd like to think that they will be proud of the things that we are doing today. But also I'm very aware that climate change and the broader planetary health crisis is very unequal. So I look at my work from a justice, social justice perspective. I know that there are gender injustices that should be talked about. It's an intergenerational justice concern as well. In a situation like the Philippines, where the distance between the rich and the poor is just so wide, the impacts of climate change is very unequal, disproportionate. Who gets to decide on who gets the help? It's still very disproportionate. So I'd like to think that we are doing this for those who need more of our work, of our scientific attention and community attention.
Yes. For my part, I just want to end this podcast with sharing my recent experience of being a wanderer, as in WA, which is always about wandering, also about thinking about the things that you experience. And in my latest wandering, I actually traveled to Italy during a war, defying a war, passing through Dubai for a wedding, for my son's wedding. He and his Rico and his wife Cara wanted a small wedding. You know, ironically, right? You want a small wedding, you go to Italy or somewhere else, right? Because here in Manila it will be a big wedding, and they just wanted to have a very intimate, small, very beautiful wedding. And it made me wonder. You know, it's a war. There's a war going on. Why are we doing this? And the answer was very clear. You should not postpone joy. You should not postpone celebration for whatever you're facing, whatever the world is facing. And here's the paradox of the Philippines. As you've both said, we are in extremely challenged environmentally and climate-wise. But it's a very beautiful country.
Yes.
Ang ganda talaga ng Pilipinas, di ba?
That's true.
Still so beautiful. We are so stressed. We are pushed to the limits. Oh, but my God, my friends, the people I work with, the activists I work with, they're the most beautiful people in the world, right? So it's very important that in the midst of all of this, right, in whatever way you can, you don't have to go to Italy, you can go somewhere else. You can be even in your backyard, right? Celebrate, because life is beautiful even in its most painful moments. This wonderful conversation about the relationship between the environment, our fight to protect it, especially to protect our climate, and mental health, reminds me of my own personal experience, which I wrote about in my book, Ransomed by Love, A Happy Changemaker's Unfinished Journey. So I would like to close this episode, which I will do for every episode, by reading the following passage from the prologue and the epilogue of the book. When my brother Kakoy got sick, I realized my own mental health challenges had names. Before that, all I knew was that I was always seeking alone time. I talked to myself in a hidden corridor by the side of my grandfather's office in the duplex our family shared with our grandparents. I imagined many worlds where I was a hero and immersed myself in movies. One day, I was the action star Fernando Po Jr., the next, June Aristorenas, and of course, Tony Ferrer, but never Erap, the action star who would be an imprisoned ex-Philippine president in the future. I was one of the dirty dozen, a cowboy or a Roman general, maybe even Clint Eastwood, but not John Wayne. My mind when I was young, and sometimes even today, can be like a locomotive that runs constantly, unable to stop, swerving here and there. I remember watching Akira Kurosawa's Dreams and saw myself in his depiction of Vincent van Gogh. Sometimes I think I'm going mad. In those early years, I was already Doctor Strange, having the ability to remove myself from family fights, even as I was still physically there, flying in my mind to anywhere I wanted to go. I studied the rudiments of astral travel as a child and mastered it later as an adult, especially during the pandemic. where I would visit friends in hospitals to comfort them. Later, I grappled with such terms as bipolar, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, Asperger's or being in the autism spectrum, being neurodiverse, having depression, and narcissism. I learned to pray and find consolation in gazing and being gazed at by God. Many times in my life, I found that choosing solitude is sometimes good and necessary. By the grace of the Lord, I always came back to the room, to the world, to those I'm called to love, to decide when I encounter crossroads, to embark on missions and journeys of serving the poor and the oppressed and protecting the earth as God had intended to be enjoyed by all of humanity. You can get copies of this book if you want to, still available from Shopee or through this website of the podcast. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to both of you. This has been a really good day of wondering and wondering.
Maraming salamat po.
Salamat.
Thank you.
What an incredible journey this episode was. Thank you so much again, John and Bea, for sharing with us your insights on hope, mental health resilience, and wondering together. Once again, this podcast is co-produced by Tala Storytelling Collective and made possible by listeners like you. I'd like to invite all our listeners to follow our social media accounts and join our discussions. You can follow Tala at talastory.studio. You can follow our podcast on social media at wanderer.podcast. This is the Wanderer Podcast. I'm your host and Wonder Facilitator, Tony Viña. See you in our next episode. Safe journeys, and I hope you find what you're looking for.